Good evening, everybody. Just trying to get everything organized here. Good. Great. There weren't many questions coming. If I could emphasize, there could be more coming about these podcasts, simply because they're there for everybody. And if you have questions, I'll try and answer as many as I can. This one's from Norma, and she's in Kingston, and she's not sure about the question, but in and around there is a question in what she's saying. And she says the conscious awareness of reactions and patterns become repetitive, and she recognizes the old ways as far back as her family of origin. In other words, she's in her 60s and she's remembering back. Some of these reactions occurred with her family of origin, and she's becoming a little perturbed that she's actually using them. So it's quite an interesting shock. But she says there are times when a shift is present, and then the surprise of the slip back into these old patterns. And she's not sure where this question is, but she's a little bit concerned that she's still using these patterns. Now, it's an interesting dilemma. We practice these patterns for 60 years, and then we become aware of them, and we want them to go right away. That's only for the good ones, but there's so many really positive things that we do as well, that we're so focused on the not so positive that our engagement is really not so surprising, I guess. More focused on the realization that we're seeing something that we don't like. We may have noticed it in other people and they should be changing. But then we see that in ourselves, and we're a little bit shocked that that could really be there, and how possible is that to exist in us? Well, partly, if we try to remember the relationship that we have with being a human being and try to realize that we are human beings, it's a bit shocking to find that out at first. There's all those other people who are human beings, and they're kind of normal, but us, well, we're human beings, but we're not. We're more capable of not having the things that we see in other people because we don't see them in ourselves yet. So for many years, it runs in two ways. We're first of all unconscious of a lot of stuff, and these are reflex reactions that everybody has. Now they're either internal or external, and when we see them, as I said before, in others, it's fine, but we wish they wouldn't be like that. But when we begin to see them, and we have kind of a way of engaging with that, which often is just about, you could almost say, we just basically react and judge other people. But then when we see them in ourselves as they come out, we see them and then begin to defend these unconscious reactions. We defend them because they're reflexes, and we're basically used to using them all the time. And they've kept us in good stead all our lives according to how we think we need to be, or have thought we need to be. And they're really basically, they've been a help to us from the views that we have had previously. It's just right now we're starting to see things differently and realize that these things are not always as pretty as we thought they were in us. One of the things that we have to be a little careful of here is not being negative towards them and trying to use our thinking process along with our emotional reflex responses to these things. You might, as Norma says, you might notice some of these responses that maybe you've seen your parents use, but you've seen other people use them too. and you've used them as well, but you haven't noticed that much. Or it's been really appropriate when you use them. But if you look at them, because your conscious awareness is increasing, when you see them inadvertently in the wrong place, in a place where you don't necessarily need to be doing those things, that means that you are actually beginning to notice mentally what is going on emotionally. This is a big deal. The next move is to be careful, because your emotional reactive system will automatically defend you doing them. And in fact, you may even negate the fact that you're doing what you're doing, because it puts you, let's say, it loosens the face that you're trying to keep forward in relationship to how you think you need to be or are. It's an identity thing. It can be a little embarrassing. The dilemma is you won't be embarrassed right away. You'll be defensive right away. And with just a little reconsideration, you can say, oh my goodness, is it possible that I am reacting because I am doing these things? Or in an enormous case, as the awareness is evolving, then, or developing, and these defenses show up, you start gingerly at first, but then noticing really that these are defenses, and they are kind of critical. And in fact, they could be softened quite a lot and just used as a reporting system. Oh my goodness, mentally speaking, I noticed that I was doing that. You don't have to tell anybody else. Tell yourself. Because you're a part of the cultivation of an awareness that is really previously blind in you. And not blind in a negative way, none of that. It's blind because being blind helped you. Not seeing things mentally helped you not to notice that some of your reactions were not necessarily as helpful to others, but especially you, unknown to you, as they are. Because we practice everything that makes us, puts us in a position of winning somehow. It doesn't even have to be a legitimate win. It just has to appear to be a winning thing. And that is really comforting in a kind of a way, because there is vulnerability in not being right. Good God. All of us then must be vulnerable, because inadvertently, everything that comes out of us is not necessarily right versus wrong. In the emotional disposition, right versus wrong is a tribute to how important and valuable you are. In the mental orientation, being right and wrong is secondary. Primary is being fully aware of the fact that you are noticing how this person, you, with your name, with your identity, is expressing themselves for the purpose of maintaining the exact identity, even if the identity image is unknown to you. That's a mouthful. A little disconcerting. But not really. If you can engage that way, then you're possibly destined to remember that where you focus, where you react, that's part of a focus, even if it's an unconscious focus. How you engage, how you relate, how you attend gets increased. So if you're looking just as reporting what you see in you to yourself, a very mental thing, you broaden your awareness mentally, and you soften down inadvertently your reactive state that needs to defend you from seeing what is there as opposed to what aligns with the dream or the illusion of the image that you portray or you believe you portray. The reason for having this be of some value is that you can actually see what you're doing and be okay with allowing yourself to say, you know what, I'm not sure I agree with that. That may not be helpful to me. First cause, you, so it may not be helpful to you. Second cause, others. But first cause is always being, through the practice of living life, something that is defended so that you feel more comfortable inside. What happens with this is that there's an increased intensity around increased awareness. So increased intensity around increased awareness. Now let's try and think that through for a second, if it makes some sense to you. You're noticing things that you never noticed before. You're still capable of defending those things that are there. So there is an automatic increase in the defense, and then you're seeing the defense. So intensity has occurred. Increase, intensity, has occurred, and now a little self-talk has to come up where you say, easy down. I would say, easy Ron, take it easy. It's okay. What is this all about? Why am I doing that? Well, you've had a number of years practicing the doing of this other thing. So I could say, if you had 60 years of doing this, then you would have another 60 years of practicing something else. Now that makes you 120, so that's a little bit more difficult. So you have to be okay with being a little bit less cynical or less judgmental about what you're seeing. And maybe you can practice being a little softer, at least. And sometimes a good sense of humor might come in handy, if you can find it, because sometimes sense of humor hides on you a little bit, but it's still in there. I just want to see if I've left anything out here. I wrote some stuff down. I wasn't sure about how demanding this question could be. So I also wrote down, remember these are survival reflexes, and they're expressed in a fashion which we believe has generally worked for us. And it's neither good nor bad. It's worked for us, so therefore it seems to make sense, because it so-called works according to our ability or our inability to see how they really worked. Broad-based, they may not have worked emotionally. You just might have felt superior for a little while. And if you felt superior, maybe that was an important thing, because you were ultimately not that superior, maybe very vulnerable. So therefore, engaging in a superior way makes you need to do that because you're vulnerable to others thinking that you're not that superior. Never mind others. You're vulnerable to you thinking you're not that superior. Therefore, that increased little nudge makes you feel a tiny little bit better for a short period of time. But it interacts strongly with the unconscious. And remember, unconscious is a good 90% of you. And some say more. So becoming more consciously aware of some of that 90% allows you to give feedback, literally, to what's going on inside of you, but being respectful now. Not necessarily in full agreement, but respectful. My goodness, this is how I've been trained. Okay, I see that. Alrighty. Now, that is very easy to talk about. I can sit in front of this machine and talk about this stuff. But look, when you're living life, you're really engaging with an increase in conscious awareness because you are working towards a movement from as you are now to something beyond that, which includes as you are now. That's something to take in, which includes as you are now. So now that includes then your relationship with attempting to notice how you are now, being kind to it, recognizing it, and know it'll take a little bit of practice to soften down some of the natural reflex reactions that would occur because of all the practicing that we've done over the years. There's no negation in that. You hear that? No negation. It's more, this is how the human structure, in accordance with how it was trained in my way, but acts and reacts. That's how it goes. Not always negative. Some very constructive things in there. Some things that maybe you might want to do slightly different. Some you might want to do a little bit more than slightly different. Or you might immediately say, no, that does it for me. And the rest of the world should fix themselves. As for me, I'm pretty well fixed up. According to my image that I'm holding dearly to me. Especially now. Next thing is, because of the engagement that we all have in relationship to meditating and increased flow coming in, what you tend to do is automatically focus on those things that are in the unconscious. When they come up, they're a product of increased perception being brought to bear on what occurs in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5% that drops you down into an awareness of about 86 or 87 or 85% of this tremendously vast engagement with mind, emotion, and universe itself on more than this level. So we're moving slowly into a broader engagement with perception. Intermittent amongst all these spot perceptions of us is the possibility of perceiving something other than us. So you are training your perceiving mind to notice not only you, as we're trained to do, only notice us and the things that really tick us off a little bit, and we like as well. But you see things other than that, and if you can cultivate that mind plane a little bit, meaning a little beyond your natural, normal reactive states in the mental planes, then suddenly you notice that there might be a perception of how to see what is going on, and there seems to be no negation involved with it. It's just an added perception, another option, another understanding. Much more respectful, possibly, but inadvertently you believe you're already respectfully relating to almost anything that ever happens in your life, in theory at least. So you're broadening out a willingness to go beyond the images that you've already constructed. But you also know that you're deeply rooted to this plane with your physical form, your friends, your parents, your loved ones, people that you don't like that much. These are just as rooted. To soften these down is very valuable. You can only soften them down through an engagement with you. First you, then others. See differently. Understand differently. Sometimes the things that tick us off about other people are the very issues that are involved with us. Somehow, even in a small way, we don't like to see ourselves doing the same thing as other people are doing. Just a mental thing that you could note and soften that down. Okay, whoa, I didn't know that it was like that. Little self-talk like that. Easy. Okay, let me think about this. Wow, I have that reaction too from time to time, but I don't necessarily look at it. But others are more forthcoming about that, and I don't like it when they are. Don't like it because you have a little bit of that and you don't want to see it. No, it's just that when I have a little bit of that, I even disagree with myself. Well, you have a right, a tremendous right, to just not accept anything and everything that you believe you see in you. You don't have to agree with it. You can look at it and nudge it a little bit into a different perspective. You have that capacity. And believe me, energy does follow thought in that. And in fact, you can attempt to help yourself. Sometimes you'll be very successful. Sometimes you will not. It is the nature of an engagement with anyone, including yourself. But you don't have to agree with everything that you do. Or you don't do. Do the best you can. It's all it's called for. And sometimes the best you can isn't not enough. Oh, what species? Human being. Human being species. It's what we are. Others will have the same difficulties as you will. So respect them and engage and understand the difficulties that they are in, that are encroaching on their images that they are perceiving out of the unconscious. And the species, if you take a look around, itself is a powerful being. And it impacts on us, literally. You can prove this one. Look at reproduction. You'll find it all the time. The species wants to make sure that it can reproduce. It's a really big thing. If you don't have the species, you don't have us. So it's really large, and we engage with that. Caring for other people. Sometimes being alone. Really big. Then, all of a sudden, not being alone is more important. You are a part of every other part of the species. So, there are many other vulnerabilities. For example, if you're engaging with news, I told people for years I wasn't able to watch the news, so stopped buying a paper. For 20 years, 20, 30 years, didn't read, didn't want to see the news on TV. It was bloody awful all the time. Then, in fact, knowing fully that we are a part of that news, it's really hard to engage and recognize that you are at war with yourself all the time. You ever tried to be honest with yourself? Internally, not telling anybody else. And being respectful while you're trying to be honest with yourself. You will find out many things that you don't agree with about your, let's say, responses when you're engaged with life. What is that about? It's very curious. I have some people that I know who always say they're only interested in the truth. That's honesty, in case anybody didn't know. And then you find out very clearly that a truth for them relates directly to a belief system that they harbor as the only belief system that's valuable. This is very disturbing to me. it really implies that we do not know what a truth really is, unless we have a belief system, and then we defend the belief system to be our truth. And we haven't even attempted to find out what that truth is that lies within us, because it may not necessarily agree with a belief system. Okay, what's all this in honor of? You have to ask these questions from time to time. Well, you don't have to, but it's interesting to do so. If you ask yourself questions like this, then you begin to realize that we don't know very much about honesty and truth. We try to be as honest as we can until we come to seeing ourselves and how we function. Then honesty goes out the board, and then we protect what we believe is occurring to preserve our way of engaging with others and ourselves. We preserve that because it, in our own mind, is preferable rather than putting ourselves down for things. I happen to agree with that. With what? Well, what would you rather do? Put yourself down or agree with yourself? It's a no-brainer for a lot of people. But if you look at it and you really ask yourself, when you say something, is this something valuable for you if you were listening to you? If someone else was using the same words, and you were allowing yourself to think about those words, not react to the words. Oh, the reactions occur, then you have to calm them down a little bit. You know how to do that, at least a little bit. And then you wonder, why is that reaction occurring? Because these words tend to be perceived as attacks on the idealization of the identity, whoever has it. But we all have places within ourselves that relate to a truth that is kind of frustrating for us to see. And universal truths are seen through the glasses that relate to beliefs. In all honesty, all of these beliefs are fundamentally helpful until you start engaging with them directly and beginning to realize what they are, and you find out that pieces and parts of all beliefs are of great help. Whoa, just a minute. All beliefs? No, just a minute. Only one belief. No, all beliefs. Pieces and parts of all beliefs seem to be of value to us. Making sense of it is harder for us. So what we do, honestly, is we try mentally to see something, and then we realize that our emotions are involved. And these emotions deeply try to discern a relationship with something that makes some sense. So there becomes a link between the heart and the mind, especially the willingness to have a mind that is more open. Now you try to make sense of that link. And then you begin to realize that you can actually perceive the link. And then you question yourself and begin to wonder whether heart and mind are really deeply tied together. And this is really confusing. Because then, if they are, then anything that happens on the planet itself touches you. And you have to be careful. Because you may start reacting to the planet and ignoring what goes on in you. And you may feed the planet the very thing you don't want to feed the planet. You don't want to see in the planet. I noticed this years ago. I had to be careful not to be too angry. Then I realized, my goodness, anger is a part of our relationship with life. Stubbed my toe. Got frustrated really badly. Well, I broke the toe, but it's this stuff. And then so I had to deal with initially the reaction of the pain. How do you react to that? Well, I might have said, oh, heck and all. Or something else. Something else that might be, maybe to some other subject, I might have said, oh my God, what are people thinking? And then realized that reaction was not helpful because I am focusing on, and we all do this. I know, I realize that. We're all focusing on increasing the putting down of others who are involved with that kind of thinking or action. And in doing that, we add to their action and their thinking. Oh boy, what does that bring? I told you it's difficult to figure this stuff out. Then the other issue is, if you don't tell yourself that you don't agree with something, and you really don't agree with something, your emotions may fume a little bit until you recognize it consciously. You might take it out on somebody else. You might not, but you might. Because emotion, if intensified, will increase in intensity around any question if it's stimulated by another one, another answer, another reaction, not even closely affiliated with it. So you'll never run out of things to see within this great, wondrous engagement with a personality. Because that personality is complicated. And it is linked up through the brain and the nervous system with everything that exists. And all those nerve endings that go up to the head for you to make sense of the world. And you to interpret what you're perceiving. Again, you've constructed those perceptions and you believe your perceptions are the only ones that are valid. But you have constructed those perceptions to interpret the world. Oh, also yourself. But world first. The deepening of increased flow, increased consciousness, needs to focus somewhat on spiritual orientations so that you can soften down your relationship with the willfulness or the harshness of being validated by your own expression. I've heard a lot of people say, well, the will is the key. I think the focus is the key. The attention and the awareness is the key. We're fraught with misunderstanding simply because we're reaching always to go beyond what we used to think, because we know it just isn't perfect. Where others are focused on maintaining what they used to think, mainly because it, as again, relates to belief. I think it's a dilemma. Internal spiritual growth is a dilemma. But you're blessed with the capacity to deal with it slow and easy. And you can defend against moving slow and easy by the apparitions of assessment that relate to right and wrong. And they are apparitions. They're not real. They're just opinions. But we base all of our sensing mechanisms on opinions. First of all, we sense out. And then we associate those things that we sense out, those perception needs to perceive through our senses, and we bring them together and we relate to it as a perception. So we have a perception now. Now we have a perception, now we have to bring it in and make some sense of it. Move towards meaning and understanding of what we believe we perceive. Not for a second wondering about the validity of our perceiving mechanism, forgetting entirely that we are perceiving relative to how we've been trained to perceive, and that is not fully developed yet. Sobering. When you think about it, but honest. And being respectful to the idea, this is how I have been trained, you have been trained, everyone's been trained, relative to you. Recognizing that it's okay, but movement beyond that needs to incorporate a moment of pause, significant pause, and quiet in the emotional and mental disposition, so that you can reconsider what you might think currently. And if you get enough of those, multi-millions or thousands, adjustments will be made because perceptions will be affected. And you will read your sensing differently over time. To open it up, not tighten it up, so that you can understand deeper your relationship with you as a being of consciousness, as opposed to an image or identity that you must protect. Being of consciousness only meaning movements into territory you don't yet experience or even understand while thinking you do. Nothing negative in this. This is just exciting, sort of. There's a deepness to this, and in the meantime, you have to live life and try to be as happy as you possibly can. Because to do it the other way, live life and be unhappy, you're just defending your defenses. If you tend to grumble about how you've been, it doesn't help. You increase the grumbling of how you are instead of how you've been. Let it go. But know where it is. And say, okay, can I do this differently? And when you do, you started to think. You started to not negate, but influence previous processes of thinking. However, they will circle back. You have trained them to circle back. They will circle back. They will do your bidding. And not negatively. They'll come in and you will notice that you've just reacted the way you used to. Now's the time, right then, to say, easy, easy, easy. Talk to yourself inside. You don't have to tell anybody else. They've got them to deal with. That's enough. They would much rather align with you or tell you to do something differently. That means they don't have to deal with themselves. Just keep them busy like crazy. That's lovely. It's a good system. Never thought of that one, although I might have used it many times. Now there was one other question. What was it, Natalie?
What happens when you go into meditation and you're trying as best you can to tune into as high as you can conceive of, and you wipe out? And I wanted to know what happens while you're out. What's happening in you?
Oh yeah, I don't know if you heard that question. I'm not sure if I can remember it. So when you meditate and you're thinking of a higher level, and suddenly you find yourself out, in other words, kind of a semi-sleep. Is that the idea?
Gone. Just
Gone. Out cold. It's always a pleasant way to meditate when you fall asleep like that. It's just wonderful.
It's
It's just terrific. It's the best way to go. So what really goes on there is, if you're moving into a state, just follow this. First of all, you think of the question, you're kind of in a semi-beta state. I would say, I'm thinking of a question, and I want to meditate, I want to get up there. And then you slowly move into an alpha state. And then you deepen even more because you're still trying to focus on something beyond yourself. And really, the focus works because you're capable of focusing. And you move into the alpha and deeper, I think it's 38 hertz, something like that. And then you go into 39 or 40, and I think it's called, what is it, gamma? No, theta? One or the other. And then you go even deeper, and by then you're out cold because you've been sleeping since you entered into about 39 hertz. You probably drifted into about 36 or 35, and you're into Lululand. But your last focus was on reaching upward. You will bend and reach your consciousness a little deeper. Of course, with one proviso. You get grumbly, you get miserable, because, oh, you fell asleep again, this is not working, blah, 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 blah. Now that pulls you back down into the beta state. There's no possible way that you can engage with higher levels when you're in that state, except the higher level of the personality knowing exactly what's going on, and it's never attained any high state. But it knows exactly how it is. You can't tell it anything, because it's in what they call the survival mechanism state. Something like that. Now, when you notice that you come back out, it's the time to remember, just as you come back out, because you circle into the theta level, and bingo, 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 and then you come back into the upper alpha state. It's like being in a dream state almost. And as soon as you go into there, you reassert, softly, with respect, the ache to be beyond where you are now. The ache. Not the will personalized. The ache. Now by that time, it really relates to either an emotional hope or a mental remembrance, almost, that you are in need of being in that state. You will go in again. And you will draw your capacity, like a little chimney, draw your capacity to maintain an awareness a little longer, past that 38 into 39, 40, and if you're lucky, even up to 45 hertz. You might be able to even leave your body at some stage. It will not probably occur necessarily, only at that state. But if you are doing this, the strange thing is, as you reach up, there is a reaching down. And the link up is there. But what happens is you stand in the way of the reaching down, because it's totally and completely unknown, and it will affect you. It will affect you. And you will find yourself defending against that effect. Fair enough? Same thing when you're dealing with the realization that the world itself affects your solar plexus. And that affects your heart center a bit. And you have an internal reaction of running. You don't want to watch this. You can't. It's so hard. Gosh, sometimes those TV programs are just, they drive me bananas. I can't hold myself to them. Others, I know what, if there's a beginning, middle, and end, I know what the middle is going to be because I know what the beginning is and I know what the end is going to be. And generally speaking, those don't bother me. It's the ones that are really miserable. And, well, they bother me because you are drawn into those emotionally. And if you have a strong solar plexus, which is very necessary in the process of growth, what occurs is that you are drawn into those things. A piece of you goes there, and you are sensing out the acting of what's going on in this movie, and it's not even real. It's a movie, and that affects you. Same thing is true when something is real. Same thing. Same thing is true when you're engaging with other people, literally. If their intensity increases, you will be affected by it. You have to learn how to calm that down. Not good enough to blame other people. You have to learn how to calm that down in you. Because you are going to become more sensitive and you learn how to soften down. It means you can perceive more. That's called increased perception, increased awareness. You understand because you're perceiving. Remember, the sensations become perceptions, become aspects of meaning, move to understanding, and then you have a concept in your head about what all of this or that or some other thing means. This happens within seconds. But if it slows down, then you're adding different meanings, different understandings, including options that are different than the ones that you were willing to add before or put onto something before. And you recognize the relationship that you have with not only this plane, but other planes as well. Because the linking up makes you more perceptive. The linking up makes you more perceptive. I think that is answering Mary's question as well. Well, this is not uncommon in relationship to everybody's engagement with life. So you have to learn how to be okay with softening it down verbally, personally interacting as you might say as we're talking, but also your reactions are a personalization of something that relates to you. So you'll have to learn how to soften that down. Unfortunately, increased perception means increased perception. It means seeing the world differently than you would have been able to see it years before or days before, because it can happen quickly. Then the person who is the defender of the identity, that means you, is in a process of learning how to soften down the defenses. But oh my goodness, sometimes the old ones zero around, like Norma's question, and you almost have to get to the point where you attempt to interfere with that, and if you don't catch it, you bring your attention to the fact that you missed that one. Not because other people tell you about it, because you notice it. You noticing is more important to you than other people. Because if other people tell you something, it will bring out more reaction. Because they are telling you because they don't want to deal with their own. This is just a process called communication. It's not a negative process. Fundamentally, we're still learning how to communicate with each other. To be all honest, we're learning how to communicate through language. Would you agree? Just talking to people who are here. Would you agree out there? There's many, many things that go on inside of us that we don't make sense of. Many things that we don't want to make sense of. Because sometimes we're very good perceivers and just don't understand that we perceive, but we don't have meaning yet. We don't have understanding. We don't realize that almost everyone on the planet has similar things occur to them internally with respect to how to engage with others, almost every one of them has similar things happening. And we believe that we are unique, and those are the things that we have happening. Not so. Not so at all. They have many things happening. They're in different stages. Some don't notice they're happening. Some notice they're happening, and they don't want to be a part of it. So they back away. They learn techniques of backing away from it. And it's legitimate. That's part of what we do here. And then others begin to notice what's occurring and then begin to make sense of them slightly different. Others are energetically focused, as well as engaging very personality-oriented stuff. And the two are confusing together. And eventually you begin to make sense of things in a broader manner. And it helps a bit. It's not perfect yet. Much more to be added. The experience must be yours as well as reading it from the works of others. That is called internal growth. Other kind of recognition and understanding is based on memory work, not perception. Now, this is about growing internally, personally. And it can be disconcerting, and it can be so gloriously beautiful. Just lovingly tremendous. And you realize and understand, with at least a level of some compassion, the great difficulty that everyone has in relationship to real perceptive internal growth. And how much help we really get from other levels or other planes. Thanks very much for listening. I wish you all well. And remember some of the tools. They'll help you in your journey. And remember the self-talk as well. Be respectful to you. Be hopeful. Be honest. And wish you well. Bye for now.